Hello there, Rosewood Gaming here. Today I will be doing a deck profile of my all-time favorite deck, Charmers. Charmers are a control-based archetype of spellcaster monsters of various attributes. Over the years, the Charmer deck has received a good amount of in and out of archetype support. Throughout the video, I will be going over my ratios and explaining any changes I may make later on in the future to the deck. If you happen to have ideas or suggestions for the deck, feel free to leave them in the comments below, as I'll be sure to give them all a read. Without further ado, let's begin the profile. To start things off, I'm playing 3 copies of Fairy Tale Luna. She's the most important normal summon of the deck, as, on her normal summon, she can add any spellcaster with 1850 original attack from my deck to my hand. She also has a secondary effect where, as a quick effect, she can target one monster the opponent controls, and, unless they send a card with the same name from their deck or extra deck to the graveyard, both Luna and the opposing card return to the hand. Neither of her effects are a hard once per turn, so if you have a way to loop Luna multiple times throughout the turn, that can help with the consistency of your deck as well as ease of breaking the opponent's board. Next, I'm playing 3 copies of Fairy Tale Rachka. On normal summon, Rachka gives your opponent 500 life points, then they'll look at the top 3 cards of your deck and add one of them to your hand, with the remaining 2 cards getting shuffled back into the deck. She also has a battle protection effect where, when she battles, she can send herself to the graveyard and essentially negate that attack. Due to the fact that both of her effects are a hard once per turn, as well as the fact that she's searchable by Luna, I may cut her down from 3 copies to 1. The other reason for that is because her search effect relies on giving your opponent deck knowledge of what cards you could have drawn, which is not always worth it in my opinion. Next, I'm running 1 copy each of Win, Hita, Aria, and Auza. You don't play them for their effects, as their effects will never really come up throughout the duel. However, you play them due to the fact that they are searchable off of Luna, and all have different attributes from one another, which will be explained why that's important later on throughout the video. Next, I play 1 copy of Maiden of the Millennium Moon. I don't play her for her effect for the most part, but she does have an effect that she can place herself from the hand to the spell and trap card zone as a face-up continuous spell. Then, if your opponent activates a card or effect while she's in the spell and trap zone, she can summon herself out, which means you essentially get a free level 4 body to punish your opponent for using any kind of hand trap during your turn. If I do cut Rachka down from 3 copies to 1, I plan to add a 2nd copy of Maiden so I can see her more frequently. Lastly, for the monsters, I play 1 copy of Volmina, the Sacred Dragon, and she has 2 really good effects. Her pendulum effect is that if you special summon a monster by the effect of a trap card, she can summon herself and remove a card from your opponent's board. Then, if your opponent declares an attack, she can place herself from the monster zone back to the pendulum zone and return that attacking monster to the hand. Lastly, if she's destroyed by an opponent's card, she can place herself in the pendulum zone, meaning that it's pretty much very difficult to get rid of this card once she's on the board. Next up we have the spells, and I play quite a lot of them in this deck. To start them off, I play 1 copy of Change of Heart. Change of Heart is really good in this deck, as not only can it be used to break an opponent's board going second, but the monster you steal can then be used for your extra deck plays, if they're applicable for them. I then play 3 copies of Time-Tearing Morganite. This card is like bread and butter to the deck, as it gives you an extra normal summon each turn, turns each of your draw phases into a Pot of Greed, and if you banish it from your graveyard and discard another copy of it from your hand, your opponent basically cannot interact with you for the entire turn. The drawback, though, is that essentially you cannot play any hand traps in the deck if you play this card. I have been tempted to cut it down from 3 copies to 2, more so because opening with more than 1 in your opening hand is not always good, as at times it can clot your hand with unnecessary cards that are difficult to get rid of. If I do cut it down to 2, I may add in some floodgates, or maybe more cards I can use throughout the deck. Next, I play 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. I was playing 3 copies originally, but the card kept choking up my hands whenever I would draw multiple of it, so I cut it down from 3 copies to 2, so that way I can still see it pretty frequently, while not clotting up my hand as frequently. Next, I play 1 copy of Called by the Grave. It's another way to punish my opponent for playing hand traps, mainly Ash and Valor, since those are the 2 that threaten my deck the most. I then play 3 copies of Sol and Luna. This card pairs very well with Fairy Tail Luna, as if you activate Fairy Tail Luna as Chainlink 1 to target another monster, then activate this card as Chainlink 2, both Luna and the targeted monster will get flipped face down, and since that monster is no longer face up, it no longer has a name on the field, meaning that your opponent can't send a card from their deck or extra deck to prevent Luna's effect from returning both to the hand. Similar to Morganite, this card is a brick at times if you draw it in multiples, so I've been thinking about reducing the number of copies from 3 to 2, and adding in some floodgates or other cards I can search in my deck. Next, I play 3 copies of Spirit Charmers. This is by far the most important card in the deck besides Fairy Tail Luna, and it is a mandatory 3 of if you do play it. What it does is you discard 1 card from your hand, then take 2 differently named cards that are Charmer monsters, Possessed monsters, or Possessed spell or traps, add one of them to your hand, and set the other one face down on the field. This card is the only card worth risking drawing multiples of in your opening hand, as worst case scenario, you can discard 1 copy as the cost for another, and get the benefits regardless. Next, I play 2 copies of Awakening of the Possessed. This card is a very good draw spell in the deck, as whenever you summon a spellcaster monster with 1850 original attack, you get to draw 1 card. It has the additional benefit where Charmer and Possessed monsters cannot be destroyed by card effects, and all monsters you control gain 300 extra attack points for each different attribute you control. So if you can somehow get all 6 attributes onto your side of the field, all monsters you control will gain 1800 extra attack points per copy of Awakening on the field. I only run 2 copies in the deck, as it is searchable by Spirit Charmers, and it is also okay to draw in your opening hand if you happen to see it. I then play 3 copies of Fairy Tail Tales. Like Morganite, it gives you an additional normal summon each turn, but unlike Morganite, it also gives you protection from damage once per turn, as the first time you would take damage each turn while you control a spellcaster with 1850 original attack, that damage was reduced to 0. However, the damage protection effect isn't all that necessary, and Morganite does give you an additional normal summon each turn, so I have been thinking about reducing this from 3 copies down to 2 or even 1, in favor of other cards to further support the control-based playstyle of the deck. Next, I run 1 copy of Snatch Steal for the same reasons as Change of Heart. I can steal an opponent's monster and use it for extra deck plays. Lastly, for the spell cards, I'm running 1 copy of Secret Village of the Spellcasters. I was running 2 copies originally, but it didn't really help as often as I would like, as if I lose my only spellcaster on the board, then the village actually hurts me a lot more than it does my opponent. It does still come up at times though, especially against decks like Pirelli and Sky Striker, which are very reliant on their spell cards going through. To finish off the main deck, I have a few trap cards I play. I start off with 2 copies of Possessed Partnerships. This is probably the best trap card in the entire deck, and it is searchable off of Spirit Charmers. When you activate this card, you can special summon 1 spellcaster with 1500 defense from your hand or graveyard to the field in face-up attack or face-down defense position. Then, if you control 2 or more different attributes on the field, you can destroy 1 face-up card on the field. It does have a secondary effect from the graveyard, but it doesn't come up very often. But you can banish it from your graveyard to target 1 continuous spell or trap that lists Possessed in its name, and place it face up on the field from your graveyard. I then play 1 copy of Angel Statue Azarune. I play this more so as a target for Silahat Rabbit, as well as the fact that it has a Solemn Judgment-like effect. But other than that, I can also use it as a rank 4 material, as it is a level 4 monster by its effect. I then play 2 copies of Crackdown. As similar to Change of Heart and Snatch Steal, I can use it to steal my opponent's monsters, to use them for my own extra deck plays, but unlike those 2 cards, I can actually use this card during my opponent's turn to steal their monsters, which pairs well with a card like IP Masquerena, so you can use their monster to make your own, such as Nightmare Unicorn or SP Little Knight if you can afford it. With the limitation of skill drain, I am now running 2 copies of Power Sink Stone to supplement it, as they essentially do the same thing as skill drain, just not as well, since you need to wait for 2 monster effects to be activated first before it has the skill drain effect. I then play a single copy of Silahat Trick, as similarly to Azarune, I can search it off of Silahat Rabbit. But unlike Azarune, which would be a Solemn Judgment, this card can actually basically Dark Ruler 2 or more of your opponent's cards, as long as you have both Trick and Rabbit on the field. I then play the 1 copy of Skill Drain that we are allowed in our decks due to the ban list. More so for the same reason as Power Sink Stone, just a way to control the game and slow it down without hurting my own deck very much. Lastly, for the trap cards, I play 1 copy of Unpossessed. This card I mainly run just to have an additional target for Spirit Charmers, but it does have a few good effects that help the deck. For one, my Charmer monsters can't be destroyed in battle. Then if a possessed monster of mine attacks an opponent's monster, it gains 800 attack points during the battle step. Then, if a monster of mine is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, I can special summon 1 spellcaster with 1500 defense from my deck in face-up attack or face-down defense position, so long as its attribute is different than the destroyed monster. Now on to the side deck. I'm playing a mixture of Floodgates as well as Board Breakers, as with the fact that I can't play hand traps due to Morganite, I had to compensate in other ways. So I'm going to start with the Floodgates I'm running in my side deck, which I'm running 2 copies each of Fossil Dynapachycephalo, 2 copies of Dimensional Barrier, and 2 copies of Simul Arcfiends. I'm running a small anti-special summon package in regards to Floodgates, as if I can prevent my opponent from making their big boards in the first place, it really helps me to get an edge throughout the match. If I happen to be forced to go second, I have a mixture of Board Breakers. I run 3 copies of Dark Hole, since my deck can't really be destroyed by card effects thanks to Awakening. I figured Dark Hole would be the best, as worst case, if they give me something like Gimmick Puppet or Ibly, if I remember the name correctly, I can just quickly pop it and get it off of my field and not have to worry about it later on. I then play 2 copies of Lightning Storm with a copy of Feather Duster. Going against trap-heavy decks is probably the biggest thing this deck struggles with. As a control deck, it can't really put out pressure, so it has to counter control decks itself in another way. Lightning Storm also doubles as extra monster removal if I end up not needing to get rid of back row. Lastly, for the board breakers, I play 3 copies of Evenly Matched, which I can use to basically force out an interruption during the battle phase. Otherwise, my opponent loses pretty much their entire board. For the extra deck, I'm running a small rank 4 toolbox that contains 1 copy of Baguska for basically a 4th skill drain, 1 copy of Heretical Phobos Kovos, I'm probably still pronouncing that name wrong, which has an effect to quick effect negate as long as it has an illusion monster as material, and also steal an opponent's monster if it battles. Play 1 copy of Time Thief Redoer as another big body I can summon from my extra deck, and it also helps disrupt my opponent as I can take the top card of their deck during each standby phase, and if it happens to be a one-of card that they need, they basically lose that card from their deck and or engine. Redoer also has 3 good effects that all come in clutch at times, as if you detach a monster, he can banish himself, detach a spell to draw a card, or detach a trap to return 1 card your opponent controls to the hand. Or top of the deck, I forget which it was. Lastly, for the XZs, I play 1 copy of Daigusto Emerald. I play this card as a way to recover my resources from the graveyard, as most of my deck is spell and traps, and I don't have many monsters, so having a way to get more monsters back into my deck is always beneficial. If you want, though, you can replace Daigusto Emerald with Abyss Dweller, and just have more Floodgate-based monsters to use. For the Link monsters, we play 1 each of Win, Lina, Area, Hida, Dark, and Auza. You play a mix of these 3 because no matter what your opponent is playing, you're basically guaranteed to have their effects live to steal monsters from their graveyard, which also helps with Link climbing through Selene to recover spellcasters from your graveyard so that you can then Link climb into the impromptu boss monster of the deck, Topologic Bomber Dragon. Bomber Dragon actually works very well in this deck, as since your monsters can't be destroyed by card effects, which includes Bomber Dragons, you can essentially Bomber Lock your opponent from special summoning, as their boards are going to get cleared while yours does not. We then play 1 copy of Silahat Rabbit as a way to search Azarune and Silahat Trick, as well as any other trap monsters we may add in within the future, such as Apophis, Jiraigumo, or Quebiko, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. To finish off the extra deck, we are playing 1 each of IP Masquerena and Nightmare Unicorn, which is more so for that combination play I told you earlier with the Crackdown. As you can then use Crackdown to steal their monster, IP to link their monster and IP into Unicorn and remove another card from their field, essentially going plus like 3 in advantage, I think, or making your opponent go -2. That's all for the deck profile, and I do hope you enjoyed. See you next time.